We swung through Illinois and Indiana that hot summer, and the crowds were good and everyone was happy. Everyone except Mr. Indrisil. Mr. Indrisil was never happy. He was the lion tamer, and he looked like old pictures I've seen of Rudolph Valentino. He was tall, with handsome, arrogant features and a shock of wild black hair, and strange, mad eyes, the maddest eyes I've ever seen. He was silent most of the time. 2 syllables from Mr. Indrisil was a sermon. All the circus people kept a mental as well as a physical distance because his rages were legend. There was a whispered story about coffee spilled on his hand after a particularly difficult performance and a murder that was almost done to a young roustabout before Mr. Indrisil could be hauled off him. I don't know about that. I do know that I grew to fear him worse than I had cold-eyed Mr. Edmund, my high school principal, Mr. Lilly, or even my father, who was capable of cold dressing downs that would leave the recipient quivering with shame and dismay. When I cleaned the big cats' cages, they were always spotless. The memory of the few times I had the vituperative wrath of Mr. Indrisil called down on me still have the power to turn my knees watery in retrospect. Mostly it was his eyes, large and dark and totally blank. The eyes and the feeling that a man capable of controlling 7 watchful cats in a small cage must be part savage himself. And the only 2 things he was afraid of were Mr. Leger and the circus's one tiger, a huge beast called Green Terror. As I said, I first saw Mr. Leger in Steubenville, and he was staring into Green Terror's cage as if the tiger knew all the secrets of life and death. He was lean, dark, quiet. His deep, recessed eyes held an expression of pain and brooding violence in their green-flecked depths, and his hands were always crossed behind his back as he stared moodily in at the tiger. Green Terror was a beast to be stared at. He was a huge, beautiful specimen, with a flawless striped coat, emerald eyes, and heavy fangs like ivory spikes. His roars usually filled the circus grounds, fierce, angry, and utterly savage. He seemed to scream defiance and frustration at the whole world. Chips Bailey, who had been with Farnham and Williams, we swung through Illinois and Indiana that hot summer, and the crowds were good and everyone was happy. Everyone except Mr. Indrisil. Mr. Indrisil was never happy. He was the lion tamer, and he looked like old pictures I've seen of Rudolph Valentino